All right. Well, we will dive in on all things toxic leadership, toxic leaders, a topic that's very near and dear to my heart because I know for so many people it is incredibly hard, incredibly frustrating. People I know have had to quit jobs, quit careers almost because of the nature of the toxicity just of the situations like these. And so as we dive in, we'll be touching on a lot of different things, but just know this, just to maybe if you're coming to this and you're feeling worn out, just exhausted, drained, kind of just over it, that's normal. You're not alone, and hopefully get you some answers and just some direction on where to go if this is you. But the first thing we want to talk about as we dive in is just understanding this word toxic, because it can get thrown around a lot where, oh, they're toxic. Oh, that person, they're so negative. They're so toxic. And it makes sense. We all might have a different definition and are okay with different things that toxic to one person may be fine to somebody else. And so it is good and important to you yourself have a definition around what is toxic in the sense of what am I okay with and what am I not okay with. And I simply like to keep it as simple as possible with most things. But this in particular to say, for me, my kind of working definition is toxic anything that is harmful or hindering life-giving activities. So anything that moves me in the direction of it takes more than it gives, that it harms me more than it helps me, that it hinders me more than it kind of brings me life, whether that's me personally, the team in general. And so oftentimes that's what I see in these toxic situations. It's just an ongoing, consistent drag on the person, on the team. And it's amazing how many times that I'll talk to somebody after one of these people have been let go or fired or whatever it is. And they're like, oh my gosh, right? I feel so much better. I did not realize how much they were dragging on me or it took from me physically, mentally, emotionally. And so that, is kind of how I define it and a way to kind of gauge these situations. But as we're going through some of this information, I'd love for you to kind of think about maybe you're coming to this and you have a kind of toxic, your own tough situation you're dealing with, person, leader. So I want you to be thinking about what is that situation and kind of think through it through these questions, as well as maybe it was a previous situation that you want to think through. And I recognize too that it can be really hard because there can be so many dynamics. If you're not thinking of maybe a personal situation, that there can be a lot of really hard dynamics, such as it might be your boss, it might be your coworker, it might be somebody that you kind of have to work with but don't have much power or authority over. That can be a hard dynamic, as well as it could be somebody in your direct line of reporting. So totally understand some of this stuff may not work just black and white because of those very hard working dynamics many of you are dealing with. So with that, the first thing I want us to dive into is to understand, just dive into you, yourself, and I kind of thing of where are you physically, mentally, and emotionally? Because I want you to kind of take an account and an honest present day reality of how are you doing in light of this person, this situation. And maybe rank 1 through 10. How are you physically? How are you mentally? How are you emotionally? And you can even do it physically and mentally, emotionally. How am I when I'm not around this person? Say this person you only interact with every now and again. Am I physically like, do I get anxious walking on eggshells and then I'm at like a 5 when I'm with this person versus normally I'm pretty good right now. Life's good. I'm at a 9. So that's important distinction to know as well. And it's very important in engaging how toxic, or we'll just kind of keep using that word, that person is for you. And so number one, physically, I want you to kind of check in with yourself. How are you doing in terms of, are you anxious around them? Are they just a drain on you? Are you just kind of a nervous wreck? Like physically, what is happening for you? Mentally, I want you to think about how much time are you giving to this person, to this situation? Like not only when you're with them or have to be around them, but also outside of them. Like how much space in the head in your head are you taking? So that's another really important piece. And then lastly, emotionally. So what are the top emotions that you're feeling when you come in contact with this person? Or again, even when you think about the situation, like, are you mainly frustrated? Are you mainly annoyed? Is it mainly just exhaustion? But to think about what are those top emotions for you that come up in, with this person? Because the big question around this that I want you to think about is how much is this relationship costing you? And it could be an overarching work environment relationship. It could be one person in particular. But I want you to think about how much is this relationship costing you? Because so often this is my kind of like boom question, big question of it all. When it comes down to maybe do I let somebody go? Do I keep this person on just for a little longer? Do I change careers? I've had people that have up and changed, maybe not careers, but jobs because it's just costing them too much mentally, emotionally, physically. It was just everything usually gets worse over time as well. And so it's just, a decline that was like, I'm not willing to live in this reality anymore. And so that's what we want first and foremost, to really understand what's happening. And that's why I kind of break it down like that, is because oftentimes in these negative toxic situations we feel the things where we feel frustrated, we feel a drag, we feel just annoyed, all the things, but yet we can't quite pin down what actually is even happening. God, every time I have an interaction with this person, it just feels negative. It feels like they maybe passive aggressive, but yet I just don't feel good about it. And so it is really good to identify and give language and give appropriate language to what is happening. And am I in a good spot or not, right? Is this actually costing me more than it's worth? And so from there, we kind of move on to the next piece. So that's kind of first important is just to identify you, where you are in those areas, and then we move on to the individual. So now again, it can be a whole environment that's kind of toxic because there can be enablers. There can be one or two people that are kind of the toxic. They drum it all up, and then there's people around them that are the yes people enabling that to happen, which is, we can get into those dynamics. It's very complicated. Well, sometimes it's not actually as complicated. It's pretty black and white. But so the next phase of this is we want to now move to understanding what is happening in terms of that toxic person. And maybe you can identify it really easy, but a lot of times I find you're so caught up in the frustration and the negativity and just the wear and tear of it that it's hard to really identify what is happening. And so what I want to do is understand that behavior is absolutely a language, and it's telling you a whole lot. Behavior is 100% a language, and it's telling you so much. Because so often with these people, they have all the right words and all the right things to say, but yet you watch their behavior, you track their behavior, and it's giving you the playbook. And that's all you need to hear. That's all you need to see is their behavior, because I can guarantee it's consistent, it's consistent, it's consistent. And so that's what we want to document next. And I'm going to send you all or reach out to me. I'll send you a kind of resource that I have to help you identify their behavior. We want to put it in black and white to understand, because there's usually always themes in terms of these individuals. They may always be the victim. They may be classic kind of lies or half-truth tellers. They may be people that they blame, they give excuses. They may be quick to like triangulate, where they bring in people that really don't need to be a part of it. So they have kind of people on their side, different variations of that. And so the first kind of homework I would give you is to track all the different times in the last 3 to 6 months with this individual where you've been frustrated, or you maybe had a bad interaction, or it's been, a negative situation. But I want you to track and write down those specific examples. One might be something like, okay, I find out they told this person one thing, but they told me something else. Okay, the next thing might be they said one thing, and then the next thing they did something, but then they went and did something else. So you get some examples like that where every time I confront them on something, they always have an excuse. They never take responsibility, because I want you to then go back and identify what are the key themes of this person. Are they someone that always plays the victim, always has an excuse, always seems to kind of manipulate the situation? Because my guess is I'd put money on that more than often they have their go-to behaviors of this is who they are. They're someone that's never going to take responsibility. And so when these situations come up, because what happens is, a situation may come up and it might look different than another time, but when you really get down to it, it is like, oh, they're just avoiding responsibility again. Oh, they're just there. They don't take any accountability. And so rather than get frustrated, we can identify, and not that it's not going to still be frustrating, but we can get very black and white to understand, oh, I know exactly what to expect from this person. It may look different in different scenarios, but I can get, for there probably about 4 key behavior things going on with this individual that will come up time and time again. And why this is so helpful and necessary is because if you're going to be in this environment, say you can't quit your job, say you have to interact with this person in one realm or another, when we identify who they are, what their kind of MO is, we can then have appropriate boundaries and appropriate expectations of how to deal with this person, of how to work in spite of this person, and not have it be such a drain mentally, physically, and emotion on us. So hopefully that's making sense. If anybody has any questions, comments, confusion, let me know. We can definitely pause, or I can, touch on something if we need to. So with that, you've identified where you are. You've identified hopefully the person, and I'll send out a resource to help you kind of do this and unpack it. Because then what I want you to do when another negative or toxic or not fun situation comes up with this person is to view it then in the light of these themes. Oh, there they are. They don't take responsibility. And you can have not as much kind of emotional angst attached to it, because you've completely revamped understanding who they are, how they operate, and the adjustments you're going to make in light of that. And this is a whole process that I take people through. Like, it can take a while to be able to unpack it, because it is hard. You're emotionally invested. You're kind of like in it, and or other people outside like can see it a little less forest for the trees. So be kind with yourself in all this process. But once you've done that, once you've kind of identified their behavior, see it for what it is, the next thing I move into, and this is kind of the final piece, but also there's so much more we could get into with all of this. But the last kind of piece of this process, I say, is the 3 R's. And they are, one, you have to have radical acceptance about the situation. Because so often I see you want to try and come in and change it. You want to try and rightfully so, you want to come in and try and make it better or help, or, oh, if they could just see, or maybe my communication needs to be different. If I just said this the right way, then they would have their aha moment. No, right? You're not going to come in and save the day. If they want to change, and if they have the right pressure and consequences around them, and that they aren't being enabled and held accountable, then they get that opportunity. So that first piece is radical acceptance of the situation. When you lay out their behavior and see it for what it is, there is a sense in that process of grieving. Maybe you're grieving the boss that you never had and probably never will be, for them anyway. Maybe you're grieving a job that you thought was going to be awesome, the perfect environment, but really now that you're in there, it's not. And so I see this time and time again that it really is, again, if you're in a very toxic situation, it really is a grieving process. You're having to first, not live in denial of it. You're having to wade through the anger and frustration of it all. It's sad, it's depressing, like you're really going through that grieving process. And at the end of that is radical acceptance, where you see it for what it is. There's no rose-colored glasses, and you're able to then decide how you are going to participate, whether you're going to be kind of all in a new way, or if you're like, I'm out. I see this for what it is, and if you can get out, you get out. So the next piece of the three R's is radical acceptance. The next one is realistic expectations. Now that you see it for what it is, you understand the dynamics, your role as well as their role, you have realistic expectations of what to expect from this person, maybe what to expect from the people around them, because oftentimes there are enablers. And I often find the toxic people, they're going to be who they are. They're gonna do, life however they're gonna do it, not take responsibility, all the things, and that's just who they are. And there's probably not too much to change them unless they have some real consequences. But then the next piece that's really hard is the enablers, are the people that allow for that behavior, that don't hold them accountable, that say, oh, not a big deal, oh, it's not that bad. Those I find can be the most also kind of just, you know, deflating, because you're like, okay, they have to see it too, but maybe they do, maybe they don't, maybe they're a bit fearful to make any sort of real accountability pieces for that person. And so with that, you then also have to have realistic expectations for that whole working environment, not only for how that person is going to show up. Because by now, if you're 6 months, a year into working with this individual, you know how they're going to show up. You know how they're going to behave, and you're going to expect that from that kind of toxic person. So then you move into, once you have that radical acceptance, realistic expectations, you move into redefining your boundaries. Because now you have a great, honest reality on how you're showing up in this situation with this individual, how they're showing up, what you can expect from them. And then the third piece is redefining the boundaries, because now you get to make a powerful, empowered decision of how are you going to show up with them, how much do you, if you can, how much do you want to interact with them? I mean, I've had leadership situations where in dealing with toxic people, it's almost like I say you do leadership backwards, where you do the opposite, where you, rather than like do lots of communication and do a lot of interaction and collaboration, it's almost like, how can I do the best I can do in spite of this person? How can I, because it's just not worth it. It's not worth your physical, mentally, and emotional energy. And so you do, I've seen people, they do as much as they can in spite of as little interaction as possible with these people because it's not worth it and they want to stay and they have a lot of good reasons for staying, obviously. But then you have to get really clear on your boundaries, which is basically what am I okay with and what am I not okay with, right? What am I willing to put up with? You know, a situation comes, is that a battle I'm willing to engage with, or am I just I'm kind of out, you know, in this one. So to think about what are those things that's okay for you, and to remember boundaries are 100% about you. Yes, their behavior affects how what you do or decide, but they are for you. And so I had a situation recently where someone was like, okay, and I'm because of you and this, I'm doing this. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but they're not, we already know they're not going to hear that. So let's move to a place of kind of empowered position where you're saying, hey, moving forward, when I get a text at 10 p.m., just letting you know, I'm not going to respond to that. I'm probably in bed. I'm probably hopefully already getting my kids to bed. That's not ever going to be an interaction, you know, because this person was texting back and I'm like, do not, you know, kind of encourage that behavior you're not wanting to begin with. So you know, so you put the boundary up and you say, hey, I'm not going to respond to texts after working hours. Now, more than likely, that person, because they often do, they're going to try and push your boundaries. You put a wall up, they're going to see, oh, can I go around the wall? Can I knock down the wall? And then that is again hard because you're like, but remember, you're not working with a normal person who's considerate of you, and so the next time, you know, that text comes in at 10 o'clock, the hard part is now for you to ignore it. And then maybe 9 a.m. say, oh, okay, I didn't, you know, saw your text this morning, you know, however you kind of move forward with that. So that's often the hardest part of boundaries is you having to reinforce them because more often than not, they will absolutely test your boundaries to see, oh no, like she'll just, you know, because again, these people, they don't like consequences, they don't like accountability. So they're gonna push those things. So with that, any questions before I kind of I know we're already at 30 minutes and that's a lot of me just talking at everybody, but any questions, thoughts with some of those things, but those are kind of the key kind of phases that I like to take people through is that first phase, physically, mentally, emotionally, rank, scale of 1 to 10. How am I doing? How am I doing around this person? Moving to number two, uh, kind of black and white, sober reality of their behavior, identifying kind of key themes of who they are, how they show up, what you can expect. And then the third piece is that radical acceptance, realistic expectations, and incredible redefining boundaries. And that can be a month-long process to kind of figure out what those boundaries are, because it can be hard for you to identify what am I okay with? You know, what can I push back on? Again, depending on your working dynamics, depending on you know, all those things can be very, very tricky, very hard, for sure, for sure. Last thoughts, questions. I kind of was going to keep it right at 30 minutes. I think I'm seeing the chat, maybe not. And I know it's maybe not a topic that everyone's eager to raise their hand and ask a question. So for sure, reach out if you have any other questions, dicey scenarios, because kind of really the next part of this would almost be a webinar, take two, would be then moving to, like, you kind of can't heal fully until you walk through some of these things, and giving yourself just a little space physically, mentally, emotionally, where you can actually kind of heal. You've heard the saying, maybe I can't heal in the toxic environment I'm living in. You got to cut out the poison, you got to stop drinking the poison, whatever it is. Yeah, go ahead, Megan, with your question if you want to type it in. And so it's really important to be able to identify it, kind of think of it like a physical pain or physical wound, where you go to the doctor until you understand what the real root problem is and what's happening in the situation I'm in. Can you really move to a place of healing? So that's why I kind of start with all of these kind of tools, and then the healing moves. It kind of depends on the situation. It can be the grieving process, can be a big healing process. It can be kind of a trigger to, maybe this is like a childhood relationship you've had. I've seen that a lot. So then you have some deep wounds to kind of work through with healing. So lots can be at stake in these situations. And the kind of other thing I love to always say is to take really good care of yourself in these situations. Like, it will be draining. And so if you can take extra care outside of work or outside of, to really kind of love on yourself, it's needed. Yes. What are some key differences? The question, what are some key difference between managing up and enabling? It seemed to me I would be told to manage up when I was dealing with toxic behavior. Good question. Excellent question, because one thing that is probably a whole nother webinar though is this. I would also say, I'll kind of add in some more to your question here, and hopefully still answer it, is I find the empathy versus enabling. And we live, in a lot of teams, which are great, that are people first, that are, consider the person, you really want to take care of your team in the guise of kind of empathy, right? And it's a great word. We all want to have more empathy and have that understanding and be able to meet somebody where they're at and be in their shoes, and that empathy piece is great. You want to seek to understand, you want to be able to kind of relate to them in that way. But there's that very fine line when you move to enabling. And this is where what I see is when your empathy moves to actually help them, like, almost perk up their excuses, that their excuses or their lack of accountability or their lack of responsibility actually still puts the burden in your hands or the team's hands, and they still aren't able to take responsibility. And so if your empathy isn't moving them to take accountability and to give them more opportunity to step up to the plate, then it's becoming enabling. And usually what I see is, what I like to do usually is track how long this is happening. Because if it's 3 months and there's no change, your empathy is now enabling. And so rather than have the conversation around, all of a sudden now the conversation needs to change with that person of, hey, I hear you. I understand that's hard. I understand why that might not be happening. But now my concern is that you're not taking this feedback, that every time I give you something, there's an excuse. Because at some point with these people, usually the conversation needs to change, not around what they're not doing, but the fact that they're not even engaging in a willingness to take accountability, a willingness to change their behavior or to look inward. The conversation then needs to change. And so that enabling piece, I would get really granular on who at the end of this is taking responsibility. Because that's often what I see. And when the enabling piece comes up, is there's still a level of burden and responsibility that's inappropriately put on the wrong people, that they're still not showing up and doing their share. And so it seemed to me I'd be told to manage up when I was dealing with toxic behavior. Gotcha. So that I made it sounds like a person. It's I don't want to call anybody else. But with that, and when you're in that situation, I said these working dynamics can be really tricky. Say you don't have power and authority in this situation, and you're working with somebody that's higher up, and then it really does become how can I still do the best job I can do and not still take accountability for not what's not mine, which might mean across the board, something might get dropped, something that might fail. And I've had to have that hard conversation with someone, many people before, that says, if you're willing to let that drop and let it fail and let other people see that's not on you, that too many times you come in and save the day, then you kind of get to decide, is that something you still want to keep doing? Or you do have to let something fall. You do have to let, I've seen big thousands of dollars happen because they're like, I'm not going to come save the day anymore. At the end of the day, if it's not your responsibility, hopefully let it show for what it was. And fingers crossed, you're around an team and bosses that are willing to then make a change there and see it for what it is, because and that's incredibly hard, because I get you don't want the team to fail, you don't want a project to fail, and so that's where these situations come incredibly hard, weigh on you, because you're not a character that wants to see anything fail on your watch or that you're a part of. But at the end of the day, there are things that I've seen people say, like, I just can't, when is enough, right? And again, I'd say the biggest question, if I could kind of wrap it up with this, would be that, what is this costing you? So we can all handle so much and responsibilities and whatever it might be, but to really come back to say, what is this costing me? And then if it's someone you do have power and authority to change, what is this costing the team? And a lot of times it's costing the team a whole lot and they're not saying anything, right? Because they don't feel the freedom, or they don't, all those dynamics of power and authority. And so to leave you with kind of those two things of what is it costing you, as well as to take really good care of yourself, to be really kind and compassionate to yourself in these situations that can be incredibly hard, incredibly draining, and just really important to dig into and make sure you're not letting yourself live in this harmful environment for longer than you have to need to. So please reach out. Hopefully that's kind of helpful. I'm going to send you more of these resources. Again, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So if you have more questions, I'm going to be starting also in a few weeks, one-on-one coaching specific to toxic dynamics relationships. So if you are interested, want to kind of consult on would that be right for you, as well as starting a group to kind of hear from each other, learn from each other if you are in a situation as well. The groups it'll be a 12-week course. Probably won't start to the new year, but we'll kind of see as people come in and how eager people are ready to dive in. So thanks everybody for listening, tuning in, and with that, I'll leave you to it and reach out with any questions. Thanks so much.